Hello and welcome to Kitchen Table Talks. My name is Toni Austin Allen and I am here with Dr. Roy Austin, author of Definitions for Living, a book dedicated to helping you live more effectively and happily, both personally and in your relationships with others. A number of years ago, Dr. Austin compiled numerous articles which he had written to assist his clients into what is now his book, Definitions for Living, making sense of words and ideas that define our lives. Recently, he and I began sitting at our kitchen table and talking about his book, and we became excited about the possibility of sharing our conversations with others who might benefit from them. The podcast you are about to listen to are the product of the recordings we began making of our conversations. We have discussed the book chapter by chapter and have produced this series of podcasts to accompany the printed version of the book, which is now available as an ebook on various publishing websites. Although we believe you will benefit greatly from the podcasts themselves, you will get the most out of them by purchasing the book, reading each chapter prior to listening to the podcast, and having it available to follow along with our conversations. The ebook is available on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Scribe, Booktopia, Apple Books, Layman's, and Adlibris. We hope you enjoy our talks at our kitchen table as much as we have, and that your life will be greatly enriched by having shared our conversations with us. All right, we are back with Chapter 3, The Importance of Nonverbal Communication. So as we sit here talking with words, and no visual, it's just audio. We will talk about nonverbal communication. And
good luck on that, right?
Yeah. As I was reading this chapter earlier, I just find this fascinating chapter. It's something that I really want to know more about, really want to practice more on. And I'd like to just get you started right away with this. There's a lot to learn.
Well, a good way to get started, Toni, on talking about nonverbal communication and the importance of it is to kind of do a little historical background that has caused a lot of people a lot of trouble, unbeknownst, I think, to most people. And that is several years ago, there were quite a number of books and videos on how to read people. Mm-hmm. Both in the business world and in personal relationships. And there was a real spate of books and articles that came out on showing people how to figure out what was going on inside somebody by so-called, quote, reading their nonverbal communication, their facial expressions and their body movements and gestures and tone of voice, that we're all of which we're going to be talking about in just a minute. And it gave people the idea that they had the ability to so-called read people's minds and to know what's going on in them just by observation of behaviors other than words. I found that was a real disservice to people. First of all, it gave them a sense of omniscience and omnipotence, of having mental powers and of observation that most people really do not have. And it gave them a sense of superiority so that they could know what was going on inside somebody else, and it gave them a sense of power that really I think they should never have been given by these authors of these books. And so what we're going to be talking about is going to fly in the face of so many of these publications of several decades ago that led people to believe that they could read people's minds and know what was going on. And so as we unfold into this conversation, that topic will come up over and over again.
Well, let's just, you have them divided up into the various ways people communicate nonverbally. And the first one you have is facial expressions. And I found the stats on this kind of just incredibly surprising. Let me read this out loud. The face is the primary way people try to read, quote unquote, our emotions and attitudes toward them. Next to speech, the face is probably the main source of information in human interaction. Research has shown that less than 10% of people's perception of us is based on what we say. Almost 40% is based on how we talk, and 55% is determined by our facial expressions.
Isn't that astounding?
Totally astounding. So if I can just keep a calm face, I can say anything I want, right? No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, it really is astounding that we place so much emphasis on verbal expression, but really the truth is facial expressions are so very, very important. And so much research has been done on that down through the years of all the categorizing of the various kinds of facial expressions. And, we've seen charts, even in hospitals about, what is your pain level and all of that. And now we have facial recognition on social media and computers. And so we really learned how important the face is, so-called communicating to other people in ways that we are often not aware of.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes we are aware of it and we're not willing to admit it, because then that would have to mean that we'd have to admit what's really going on in our minds and hearts.
That is true. That is true. And I mentioned several of these more common ways that we express ourselves that may or may not be congruent with the words that we're using, like a frown, a rolling of the eyes, looking away, a slight sideways smile, or any other number of facial expressions that can be helpful in confirming your message that you're using with words, or it may just totally contradict it, or at least it gives the other person doubt as to the sincerity of what you're saying.
Could some of these facial expressions, and I'm thinking about myself, be old habits? Maybe I've learned an old habit of looking with disdain or rolling my eyes or clamming up, but my words will say, I'm fine. It's all okay. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm not okay, but an old habit is like a knee-jerk reaction.
Yes, it can be old habits, and it also, Tony, can just be individual personalities, not necessarily bad habits or concerning habits, but just the ways that our bodies and our nerves and our muscles move. So it's really important that we give ourselves and other people some slack in this area. Like a lot of people just have what's called a natural downturn of the mouth, physiologically, or a lifelong habit of frowning a little bit, or your brow being furrowed. And so a lot of people misread that into problems that don't exist. It just may be part of that person's physiological personality, I might like to call it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move on to the physical distance. That's the second on the list of different nonverbal communication. And you talk about the distance between ourselves and others, and that tells ourselves and others, and that's what I think we need to remember, how much we dislike or trust or distrust or love, and that this distance is really important. And you talk about the space zones around ourselves, and that this was another where you had some stats about the amount of space that we leave between people, and that it's kind of a universal distance with people we distrust, people we love, strangers. Can you talk about that some?
And also, there's just a physical comfort as well that we have to take into account, not just an emotional comfort. But physical space is very, very important to note what is comfortable for you, but also to be aware of others as we're communicating with them and sharing space with them, and notice their physical distance. And we talked before about a couple of the more important characteristics of what's now called emotional intelligence. One is self-awareness, and another one is awareness of others. And this is particularly true in physical distance. Sometimes we are not aware of what we're physically comfortable with and emotionally comfortable with, as far as how close we're standing or sitting or conversing with someone, nor are we aware of someone else's sensitivity to that. And we may just be involved in a conversation, sharing something with them or asking questions, and we don't notice that they're moving away from us a little bit or turning their shoulders away from us a little bit, and we just keep going and going. And when they move away a little bit, we move closer to them, and it creates a tension there that we're often not aware of because we're not sensitive to this physical distance that is so crucial for comfort in any kind of a conversation.
Well, that's true. And I've noticed myself in certain situations where I myself will move a chair away, even if it's just an inch. Like if we have to sit next to each other in an assembly or something, a lecture. And I if I don't know that person, I just need a few inches in there.
Right.
If it's somebody I'm very close to, then I'm okay. But I'll notice myself scooching over, and it's a comfort level. And I've never really thought about that. And that's really okay, is what you're saying.
It is. It's very, very important. And so we need to honor that and respect it and not crowd people or get too far away from them. And also, if we feel crowded by someone else, we need to be true to ourselves and adjust our distance from them. And if they keep getting too close or too far away from us, it's certainly okay and important to say, Bob, I'm feeling a little closeness here. Could you back up just a little bit? We're kind of awkward in doing that, but sometimes we need to do that just to be able to have a sense of comfort, and that's something that you and the other person can talk about. And if they are mature and they understand this, they won't have a problem with it. And some people feel threatened by it. So there's a little bit of a risk by being open and straightforward about your comfort zone in physical distance, as well as other behavioral patterns.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that. One, it's self-care. And I have talked to people before when they have said, this is bothering me about this person. And I said, well, do you want to talk to them about it? Oh, no, I would never say that. It's like, well, nobody else is going to say it. Why wouldn't you? I don't want to make waves. It's like, this is self-care.
Yes, it is.
And we forget that we can do this in a kind way and say, listen, this is just my personal preference, without worrying about if they're going to get defensive. And if they do get defensive, that's not our problem.
It is not our problem, and yet it can create a problem through no fault of our own in the relationship if the other person is not mature enough and adult enough to feel comfortable with that kind of openness and honesty. And sometimes they will feel offended or threatened by it, and it could influence the relationship in a negative way that you have no control over. So there is a bit of risk if you're going to be open to someone about any behavioral pattern that you or they do.
Yeah. The other thought I had was sometimes as you get to know people, you sometimes realize, because I was talking with you about this earlier, you realize I'm not feeling safe in this distance, and you will then start moving away and for safety reasons, and that's really important. And I think that goes back to true safety. If you don't feel safe with that person, it's okay to change the parameters for yourself.
Absolutely, and not feel guilty about that.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll challenge you on that. Well, what do you think? I'm going to hit you or something? And so, they get pretty defensive. And that is an opportunity for an open conversation about it that some people can manage, and some people, they cannot manage that kind of openness at all.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the body, let's go on to body movement, posture, and touch. This has some real important stuff in here. Shall I just read some of this for us?
Surely.
This is key, this paragraph. We need to be careful not to assume we know what messages people may be sending us by how they touch us, how they stand, move their arms and hands, cross their legs, or by other physical actions. They may indeed be trying to tell us something by such cues, but there may be other explanations. The best rule of thumb about such nonverbal actions is to ask. Don't assume you can read their minds.
And this is where it comes back to the first statement I made about these books and articles that were written several years ago about leading people to think that you actually can know what's going on with someone by simple observation, because we really can't. I think the key word here, Tony, is humility. Anytime we approach any conversation or interaction with another person, we need to do it with a great deal of humility and not assume that we know what's going on with that person. This gets us in so much trouble. And also there's connected to that lack of humility would be the concept of arrogance. A lot of people have this arrogant idea that they know what's right, they know what's going on, and by golly, I'm going to prove to you that I'm right about you. Like, for instance, you mentioned this a few moments ago as a good example. Someone might say, how are you doing today? And the other person might say, I'm fine. And then you may pick up on that as, well, that doesn't sound like they're fine. So then you subtly start what I call a power struggle of rightness. You might say, well, yeah, you say you're fine, but you don't sound fine. I think something's going on here. Tell me about it. And the other person might say, no, I told you I'm fine, and I'm okay. And here again, they might get a little defensive and push back a little bit. And this is where the power struggle comes in sometimes, when the other person might say, well, no, I really want to know what's going on here. You're not fine, I know it, and I need you to be truthful with me, and I know something's bothering you. Tell me. And so they get into a power struggle, and they do not respect that other person's right to privacy. Sometimes the person really is fine in a lot of ways, but they might just be distracted. They might be tired. They might be any other thing. They might be worried about something or angry, or they may not. That's not really the issue here. The issue is that sometimes when we think we or suspect that something else is going on with a person and we want them to open up and tell us, we get into a power struggle, coercive attitude. Look, I'm not leaving. Something's going on here. Don't tell me you're fine. Something's bothering you. And so you get into push me, pull you, shove me type coercive attitude, where you need to be more right about it than really helpful. And so this is where that humility and kindness and compassion comes in, where you need to say, well, I just thought I would ask, and I hope you're fine. And if there is something that's bothering you want to share it with me later, that's fine. Or otherwise, we'll just move on. And so you have to respect that other person's right of privacy by not pushing your rightness or trying to prove that you understand them better than they're willing to admit. And if they don't want to talk about it, it's important to honor that and say, if just know that I'm concerned and I care about you, and I'm not going to push you on this, but if there is anything that's bothering you, or in the future, if something's concerning you, I'm here to listen.
That's really, really helpful information, I know for me, and I would imagine for a lot of listeners right now. Now, if you do ask somebody what they were meaning, if there is confusion, how is a good way, let's say somebody is using motions or body movement that is erratic, and they're saying, but they're giving you another message. How can you talk to them about this with ease? How can you bring up this, I'm noticing this difference, and it's worrying me, it's confusing me a little bit, and I'm becoming a little frightened by this. Is that okay to bring that up?
It is okay, but your use of the word earlier, how can you do this with ease? I'm not sure you always can do it with ease. It's not easy to do that. Here again, there's a bit of a risk. It takes a bit of courage to say something like, Tony, I've noticed as we've been talking, you seem to be getting more and more agitated. At least that's the way I'm describing it. I don't know if something is bothering you about our conversation, or if you're just tired or irritated, or you got something else on your mind. So I don't want to assume anything. Is there anything that you can tell me there? Because I'm not clear what, if anything, you're trying to communicate with me with your seeming to be agitated and not really engaged with me right now. Is there something you can share with me about that? Mm-hmm. So here again, it's not easy to do, but it's important to do. And here again, it's important that we be humble and compassionate toward that other person. And if they want to talk about it, you have given them the opportunity to do so. If they don't want to talk about it, then the key is don't push it. Drop it. Say, well, if they say, no, I'm fine. Let's just keep going. Or, oh no, I'm just a little tired. I stayed up a little bit late last night. And you say, well, I just thought I'd ask. Thanks for sharing that with me. So you have to honor their right to say or explain whatever they wish to or don't wish to, and not endanger the quality of the relationship by trying to be right or try to force something out of them that they're not comfortable sharing with you. It's that humility and compassion that has to supersede your being right about a situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that goes right into the next form of nonverbal communication, the voice. I've been in it where somebody, and it may not be at me, but it's in their head. There's something going on in their mind, and their voice is getting louder and faster, and it's getting a little unbearable, and you don't know what to do. But it sounds like it's similar. Simply tell them what you heard and ask them to help you understand. Or maybe they're talking to you and they're getting abrasive, and I know that I can do that, and I might get heated and I don't realize my voice is getting more aggressive or assertive, or on the other end, maybe giving up, maybe getting unassertive.
And this is where it's important for us to be willing to here again, gently but firmly interrupt what's going on by saying something like, excuse me, I need to interrupt here just a minute. Could we put what we're talking about on hold just for a second? I'm noticing that your voice is getting seemingly more tense and louder, and I'm not sure what that's about. And could you tell me what's going on with you right now? And most people would just say, don't raise your voice to me, or don't be so loud, or stop yelling at me. So we get defensive ourselves and we get aggressive with them and telling them that what they're doing is something we don't like, rather than being curious and compassionate toward them to find out what it really is like with them, what really is going on with them. And so that's very important, is to care about the relationship more than you care about defending yourself or about knowing what the truth is. The truth is not nearly as important to me as the quality of the relationship that needs to be preserved.
Boy, I like that. And in this very last sentence in this section, monitor your voice as you speak so that it enhances your message rather than detracts from it. I can't monitor what somebody else does, but I can monitor what I do. And again, this is really hitting me to go, okay, but just like my facial expressions, I might not get it right all the time, but I can be aware and really work on self-awareness. And I like that, so that it enhances what your message is, not detract or distract from it.
And this also goes back to one of our earlier conversations about effective communication skills in the previous chapter. And that is, it helps to think ahead. Remember putting your brain in gear before you put your mouth in motion? Mm-hmm. Well, it's the same thing with your nonverbal communication. It's good to monitor your self-awareness and think ahead of what you're going to try to communicate with someone else, and be sensitive to the impact that nonverbal communication can have on a relationship, and plan that ahead. Think about it and try to match your tone of voice and your facial expressions and your body positioning to send the message that you want to send, rather than just having your brain on autopilot and not monitor what you're saying and doing and looking and feeling, to the point that you're sending contradictory or confusing messages. So here again, thinking ahead and planning ahead is important with nonverbal communication as well.
You know, I'm just thinking about a serious issue, and it is a form of nonverbal communication that we haven't talked about, and that's social media.
Oh, yes.
How easy it is to react quickly, and people forget or don't forget that there is tone in the written word. And if we don't take that time to think ahead, as you say, and think, you know, because I'm finding that a lot of people will read my Facebook post or even little things on Instagram that they'll never tell me that they've read it. They just read it and go on. So I don't realize how many people are looking at what I write. And even this morning, I wrote something that I thought was very supportive of some friends of mine, but I didn't want to mention them. So I didn't. Somebody else got on that I never hear from and thought that I was talking about them. And it's like, you have to be really careful about the content. You have to be careful about the tone that you say it in. We really aren't very careful these days, and I think social media might have a lot to do with that.
It has a lot to do with it. And because, number one, most people generally are not well skilled in basic communication skills, period.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do a very good job of it when they get on social media, and they do not form their paragraphs well, or the sentences well, or they don't sort of read it back to themselves or proofread it or think about how it might be perceived and how meanings may be read into it, and also the anonymity of social media. Mm-hmm. I don't have to be held accountable for looking at this person 3 feet away from me and having to deal with them face to face, one-on-one. So I can just say or do or express something any way I want to, and not worry about and don't really care about how people infuse meaning that may or may not be there. So the anonymity of it does not bode well for good communication.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the distance that we might keep from certain people just because of differing opinions, that, you know, we just for kindness, so that we don't offend them. Well, if we're shooting out something to the whole public, 200 friends, we lose that distance, and all of a sudden, boom, we can start hitting heads and be kind of in trouble real fast.
Really fast. Someone just, for instance, I'm just thinking of this off the top of my head, someone might write something, and without thinking, you may just thumb it into your phone and say, well, that's certainly one opinion, mm-hmm. and just put a period there, and that can be read as being so offensive, mm-hmm. and you may or may not have meant it to be offensive. You might just mean it as a statement of fact, but you don't amplify it. Your tone of voice is not there to explain it. There's not a softness to it, and you don't have a chance of interaction like that, because they may get offended and just unfriend you
yeah.
on Facebook. And so it's...
They call it the cancel culture. I'm canceling you.
Exactly. And it's because of lousy communication like this, and you don't take into account how people can sort of, quote, read your mind accurately or inaccurately on social media. And it can do a lot of damage, and either you don't know the damage is done, or the anonymity says, I don't care what damage I've done. I don't have to interact with you on a daily basis, so I can hurt your feelings anytime I want to. Mm-hmm. So not to belabor the point, but your point is well made, yeah. That social media has not helped in this nonverbal communication issue.
Let's go on to the last section. The last two, I should say. This next one is clothing, cosmetics, and possessions. And after having lived out in the middle of very rural New Mexico, I have, at first I thought, well, what is this about? I don't believe in any of this anymore, but having lived in a city, and now I will go into the city dressed very casually, mud all over my car, and I actually am drawn back into that. It's like, oh, wow, I don't look very good, So it is still there very much. And how do you deal with this? Because it's real. I find it very superficial. I always have, but it's very real, and we have to deal with it.
Well, it can be very, very superficial, and in that sense, deceptive. It is a simple fact of life that how we look, what we drive, how we take care of ourselves, whether we bathe and shave and get decent haircuts and wear decent clothes, that has a lot to do non-verbally with what people think about us. And there's no way around that, nor I think should there be. Mm-hmm. I think the danger is when we use our possessions and our clothing and our the jewelry we wear or the titles that we have, deceptively.
So that's the key word.
That's the real key, is that we try to deceive people into thinking about us in ways that are not accurate. And it can go either way. A really nice person, and you see this a lot with teenage kids as well as adults, is that they're pretty neat people, pretty nice people at the heart, and yet you'll see teenagers dressing like in punk clothing and getting into drugs and driving fast and talking bad and wearing strange clothes and a weird color of hair and all of that, and the one generation may say, "Oh man, that's a screwed up, messed up person I don't want to be around," and it may be that they're just wanting attention. They're just wanting someone. They're not bad people at all, or they're just trying to. It might
just be a culture,
and they just maybe want to fit in with their friends, and so they can be deceptive in certain ways, that they present themselves as not being, quote, as good or as nice as they really are. But also it can be just the opposite, which is more often the case, is that a person may drive an ostentatious, very expensive car, wear a lot of crazy makeup, or the finest designer clothes, and join the country club and all that, to impress other people deceptively, to make other people like them for what they have and who they are, rather than just like them as a human being. So when you're using this clothing and cosmetics and possessions deceptively to try to get people to think something about you that's not true, so you can either take advantage of them or get them to like you, because you're so afraid that they're not going to like you if they really got to know you as a person. I think that's when it becomes a problem, when you're not honest with your dress and your possessions. That having been said, it's just a fact that if you want people to like you, you've got to look pretty decent. A lot of people will say, "Well, if you love me, if you really love me, if you really care about me, you won't matter. It won't matter to you how I look, whether I take a bath, or whether I watch my weight, or whether I exercise, or whether I comb my hair, or whether I dress. If you really like me as a person, it won't matter to you what I look like or how I act." And that is just flat not true. We do make impressions on people by how we look and how we present ourselves to the world, and we have to take that into account.
Yeah, I've got a lot of things going on in my head about this one, because we do live in an area where there is a lot of creative expression. And many of us have come from places where we were expected to look a certain way. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, for instance, I was in the classical piano world, and I taught my students to, when you get up on stage, you need to dress well, not to deceive your audience, but to show them that this is important to you, that you care about what you look like. And I think there is a difference between self-care and how you dress, because I've got a lot of friends that will look at me now and the way I dress and go, "What happened to you?" I've got a lot of friends who are very creative dressers. They're using their appearance as self-acceptance for themselves, and that's very important, and get into a lot of trouble from those who don't like things to be different. So we've got to, there's a lot here. I think the most important thing is that you care enough about yourself to take care of yourself. Eating the best that you can eat with what you've got, exercising if you can, cleaning the best you can, and then presenting yourself in a way that is authentic and true to you. Now, if you want to be liked, that's a whole different thing to me, because that's conformity to me. So,
well, it's here again. It's a careful balance between the context in which we're happen to be talking about appearance and dress and all of that, as well as intention. Here again, if we're presenting ourselves publicly with the intention of being deceptive in a way that's takes advantage of other people and deceives them for our selfish benefit, that's not good. But by the same token, we cannot, not in the real world, go to the other extreme and saying, I don't care how I look, and I don't care what people think of me based on how I look or whether I take care of myself or whether I bathe or brush my teeth or anything. Well, you have to pay the price for that, because in a real world, we have to interact with other people, and if we want people to like us, we have to have a modicum of self-care, which indicates here again, like you said, that we care about ourselves, not in a deceptive way, but just to be accepted into a social environment where you have the opportunity to either earn your living or develop friendships and relationships that are valuable to you. And so appearances do matter within limits of honesty and integrity.
And they really, I get what you're saying. And it, when you take it back to nonverbal communication, by not taking care of yourself, you are telling other people around you about yourself. I get that now.
Right.
Okay. And then finally, actions compared to words. Let me just read this. One of the most important, quote unquote, silent messages we send to others is how well they can depend on us to keep our commitments. Too often we want people to believe our words without backing up what we say with what we do. We need to remember that nothing else builds and sustains a good relationship like trust. That's huge.
And I ended this short chapter with this because it really is huge. It's the most important aspect of nonverbal communication there is, in my opinion. All the research has indicated that of all the factors that have been measured to determine the quality of and the continuance of a good, healthy relationship is that of trust. The integrity of the individual is crucial to any relationship, whether business or personal. And so if you say one thing and do another, you lack the integrity. By the way, integrity comes from the root word integrated. Integrated means that two or more things match. They go well together. They're not contradictory or conflicting with each other. Like they'll have, we've heard of integrated circuits. That means they all work together as a team to get something done. They're not in conflict with each other. And when our actions and our words match, then they are integrated. They work together like a well put together Rubik's Cube. And when we are not noted for keeping our word, doing what we say we will do, we are disintegrated. And that's when people fall apart. That's what disintegrated means. It's fall apart. Our words and our actions don't match. This is just a little aside. A lot of people will, they will so-called break down and cry, like at a funeral or something, or when they're hurt. And then they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I broke down there." They're not breaking down at all. They're coming together. Their emotions and their actions are matched. They're integrated. And in our culture, with its crazy rules, they say you're integrated when your words and your actions do not match. That's why they say, "I fell apart there." They didn't fall apart. They came together. So that's how crazy our world is. when they say, "I didn't mean to fall apart there and cry on you." And I say, "You didn't fall apart. You just came together." They were integrated and they had personal integrity. That's where integrity comes together. And so this is the most important nonverbal form of communication in any relationship, is when you say you'll do something, you do it.
I really, really like that. I think it is, again, it's an epidemic of this not happening. I feel it all the time. And if somebody tells you they're going to do something, I've been, in charge of volunteer sort of situations, and people will tell me they're going to do something, and you're on pins and needles wondering if they're going to get it done because they have a history of not getting things done. And then that person who's in charge is just kind of left with, it's like your nerves are frayed because you're always worried. You don't want to step in and do it, but you're always worried, is that going to get done? And you just have to let it fall. But there's risk in all of this.
Exactly. And that's why trust is so important, is because if you can't depend on yourself or someone else to do what you say you're going to do, you're going to have that kind of anxiety and uncertainty about it, and you're not going to be able to have a good, comfortable relationship with yourself or with anyone else.
Very, very good chapter. Yet again, I'm going to really read this and study it many times myself.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Again, Dr. Austin's ebook is available on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Scribe, Booktopia, Apple Books, Layman's, and Adlibris. We look forward to having you join us for our next podcast.